So while my wizard dances like a big dork, we are going to look at the passive skills for the wizard. The wizard's passive skills, I would say, are 90% great. A lot of them are used all over a lot of builds. Some have very specific uses and require certain skills, but some are just great generalist skills. So Blur, I think everyone uses Blur. It is a flat 17% damage decrease. That's just all damage. It's over half of what you'd get as a melee, as one of the melee characters, but it's still just really good. Power Hungry is probably the least used. I think I've maybe seen one wizard using it, and he was using a Star Pack build, but I just don't know about it. I think it's kind of unimpressive right now. Power Hungry, it may solve arcane power issues, but it's reliant on health globes. And that's something you shouldn't really become reliant on. I mean, Reaper's Wraps basically was a similar thing without having to waste a passive slot. And that's sort of the deal with Power Hungry, is I think most passives are just going to be better for your character. But that is the one like downer passive. Everything else is just fantastic. Evocation's a flat 20% cooldown reduction. You're stacking cooldown reduction, you're probably using Evocation. Evocation's great. It's great for actually keeping Black Hole up, and if you combine Black Hole with Strong Arms Bracers and a lot of cooldown reduction, you get a very large bonus. A very large damage bonus almost all the time. Glass Cannon, you increase your damage by a flat 15%, but you decrease your armor and resistances by 10. It's pretty obvious for what it does. It's sort of a double-edged sword beyond its normal, what you'd expect a double-edged sword to be. Because when you get to, like, greater rifts where you can just get one-shotted, it actually might be a handy damage boost. Because if you're getting one-shotted anyways, 10% fewer, 10% less armor and resistance isn't going to save you from... isn't going to cause you to get one-shotted worse. What, 1.5-shotted? So it could be a very solid thing in higher, greater rifts. Prodigy. Whenever you cast a signature spell, your arcane power restores by 5. This one we can actually show off. So we drop our meteor. And as you can see, I'm gaining the 5 arcane power every single time. Now we have to do that. So we'll go back to dancing. Astral Presence. You increase your maximum arcane power by 20 and your regeneration by 2.5. Again, it's a standard, easy to understand passive, and it's really handy for a lot of wizard builds. I think both my Arcane and my Fire Wizard have Astral Presence going on right now. Illusionist. When you take more than 15% of your maximum life in damage within 1 second, the cooldowns of Mirror Image, Slow Time, and Teleport are reset. When you use those three spells, you gain 30% movement speed for 3 seconds. Illusionist is a great passive because it resets Teleport, mostly. The other two are only okay to have their cooldowns reset. It's mostly for Teleport. It'll let you teleport a lot over a short period of time. And there's sort of a debate in my head over the new Teleport Legendary versus Illusionist. Because the new Teleport Legendary, it costs arcane power, which you may or may not have to teleport. But it lets you teleport whenever, with no cooldown. I mean, I think they put a half-second cooldown in teleport, but that's only so you don't screw up your teleports if you're spamming them. So I'm wondering if there is value in that versus Illusionist, because Illusionist basically can keep your teleport going almost all the time, because all you need to do is take like one hit, because 15% of a wizard's life, that's not a lot. You're not going to have a lot of HP, and you're going to be taking more damage than the other classes, so I do wonder whether or not that wand versus this ability is superior, or if they're just going to be options for the same effect. So, move on to Cold-Blooded. Enemies chilled or frozen by you take 10% more damage from all sources during the duration of freeze or chill. This is a great group buff. If you're playing cold, it's 10% more damage for you, 10% more damage for your party. Everyone loves more damage. Conflagration. Fire damage dealt to enemies applies a burning effect, increasing their chance to be critical hit by 6% for 3 seconds. This applies to everyone as well. So these two passives for these two damage types, really solid for building up, really solid for helping your team deal more damage, and of course for you to deal more damage. Paralysis is the lightning one. Lightning spells have a 15% chance to stun all targets hit for 1.5 seconds. This is fantastic for your electrocutes with the chain lightning. Not so much for things that hit once and then stop, like static shock or explosive blast flash. Wave of force static shock, I think it is. It works really well with arcane torrent as well. That's not to say you shouldn't use it with those two other abilities, but this is mostly for things that hit a lot and really quick to stun a lot. Galvanizing Ward's interesting because Galvanizing Ward is basically 81,536 hit points on top of your normal hit points if you don't take damage for in the last 5 seconds. And actually, that's a surprising... Damn it, I want to stay dancing. It's a surprisingly, even though we're not seeing it, it's a surprisingly handy ability. I've used it briefly before, and if you're playing wizard that's staying in the back and never getting hit, this acts as a good way to build up your HP, to build up your survivability a little bit. I think it combos well with the helmet called Pride's Fall, which is you receive a big resource cost reduction. I think it's something like 40%. If you don't take damage within a couple seconds. Because the damage for this goes to your shield, it would be able to preserve Pride's Fall for a good duration. Now, this does your shields, if you take damage on your shield, it does trigger Illusionist as well. So this can be used to protect you if you're teleporting a lot and taking a couple small hits. Temporal Flux is the arcane passive. Enemies hit by arcane damage are slowed by 80% for 2 seconds. This is a great bit of survivability. I mean, I'm not using it, but if I were to go back to Disintegrate, I would probably end up using it. Temporal Flux is a very, very solid bit of crowd control. It turns all your arcane spells into snares, and the 80% slow is just great for avoiding yourself and your party from getting hit. Dominance. Dominance replaced Critical Mass. When you kill an enemy, you gain a shield that absorbs 16,000 damage for 3 seconds. You can have it stacked 10 times. Every time you refresh it, increases the shield to its maximum potency and adds 0.5 seconds to the duration. Dominance. Anytime you kill an enemy, you get a shield. That shield lasts for 3 seconds. It can have its duration and its potency increased. It is great when you have to fight a lot of trash mobs, like in your Keystone of Trials. Throw on Dominance and you'll be very well protected during it. It is, however, useless when you're fighting bosses. If you're going into a boss, switch Dominance out for something else, because Dominance requires mobs to kill to get the shield. You don't have the shield, it's a pointless waste of a passive slot. Honestly, I think Dominance, of the 4 shield abilities the wizard has, Spectral Blade, Siphoning Blades, Magic Weapon Deflection, Galvanizing Ward, and Dominance, I actually think Dominance is the weakest of all of the abilities. Only because the shield works great with trash mobs, but if there are no trash mobs, you don't have access to the shield. The other 3, you can have your shields up all the time. That's the only reason I think Dominance is the weakest. However, Dominance is still a solid bit of survivability. I just wouldn't become too reliant on it because you do have to fight single targets a lot. Arcane Dynamo. Arcane Dynamo is great if you have single big hit abilities that you want to be bigger. Like, say, Meteor Star Pact. Arcane Dynamo, every time you cast... I have it up right now. Every time you cast a signature spell, you gain Flash of Insight. You store 5 of them, and then you cast your spell. So, we cast our spell. That is going to be a 60% stronger meteor. Then we cast 5 of these, and drop the next meteor. And bing, bang, boom, that's it. It's really great if it's really great for Meteor Star Pact, probably Meteor Molten Impact if you can time it well. It also works with your Hydras, and it snapshots channeling, meaning you build up your 5 stacks and you start disintegrating. The disintegrate is 60% stronger across the duration of your channel. Really, really solid for your like one big hit builds. Unstable Anomaly is one of the best pieces of survival a wizard has. When you receive fatal damage, you heal 45% of your maximum life, release a shockwave that knocks all enemies back and slows them for 60% for 3 seconds. You can only do this once per minute. Unstable Anomaly, it almost becomes a crutch, it's so good. It's basically 45% more toughness every 60 seconds. And that's really all you need. It is rare to have it to die while this is on cooldown, because it's just that solid a bit of survivability. It's great for greater rifts. It's great in normal rifts. My fire build has it because she doesn't have a lot of toughness to begin with. It's just a great passive. Now we're into the 2.0 passives. Unwavering Will, standing still for 1.5 seconds, increases the following attributes: armor for 20%, all res 20%, damage 10%. This is actually a really good passive as well, because if we move, as you can see, boom, it's not that long a time. It's great for any wizard that just wants extra damage while standing still. Now, if you have to move around a lot, you're obviously not going to get a lot out of Unwavering Will. So, Unwavering Will is much more for the lower end difficulties of the game, and much more, like, it works great until you get into the higher, greater rifts, where movement is more important than standing still. Now, if I were doing a greater rift and still doing a channel build, I would actually still consider this, but because it's that much of a toughness and damage increase. But for anything that isn't channeling in the higher difficulties of the game, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere for your passives. Except, I mean, there are exceptions to that. I could see using this with a Meteor build. I could see using this with if Frozen Orb gets good again, I could see using this with Frozen Orb. But I would mostly use it if you're channeling, because you're going to need the channel for a couple seconds to get the max bonus out of the channel, so this is just going to stack on top of that. Audacity is your melee mage passive. You deal 15% more damage to enemies within 15 yards. And I mean, I say melee mage, but it doesn't have to only be for spectral blades or like things that orbit directly around you. You could use this with meteors, you could use this with orbs, you can use this with channels. It's just a flat 15% damage boost to enemies within 15 yards. And as you may notice, 15, drawback, enemies get close. Drawback, you take more damage. So those, like that, the drawback is you have to stand still. All of your wizard's flat damage bonus passives do have a drawback to them, which is fine. I'm just pointing that out because that's the design. Finally, elemental exposure. Damaging enemies with arcane, cold, fire, or lightning will cause them to take 5% more damage from all sources for 15 seconds. Each different damage type applies a stack, stacking up to 4 times. Elemental damage from your weapons contribute to elemental exposure. This is your multi-elementalist ability. And if you have, like, say, this is an arcane weapon, that counts as the arcane elemental exposure. So I could go into this. I mean, I wouldn't with this weapon because this is a very arcane weapon. But if you have an Azure Wrath, the only gets cold damage. My Serpent Sparker deals cold damage. So if I were using a Serpent Sparker with elemental exposure, I could just do Fire, Arcane, and Lightning on my skills, and that's the build for that. So, that's 15 minutes. All of the wizard passives. My throat feels awful. I'm probably going to have to take a break after this before I get into anything else. So, that's all of the wizard's abilities, actives and passives, in 15 videos or so. I'd have to actually look at the count. I hope everyone really enjoyed these videos. They're really fun to make. And I gotta stop saying That's a side note. I'm gonna digress. I really do have to stop saying a lot. But anyways, we'll get into doing the 4 damage types available to the wizard and what potential builds exist in there, and I will be going over guides, and I'll do them in the same style where I started to do them off the cuff and try to do them quick, try to do them informatively, show off variations and whatnot. So that'll be coming up next. We'll go through all 4 damage types, some major archetypal concepts in them, legendaries associated to them, and what are the good and bads of all of the elemental types. So, I hope everyone really enjoyed these videos. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.